Lawyers representing survivors of the Marshalltown building fire have revealed that over 30 undocumented migrants face deportation. Norton Rose Fulbright, the law firm, is in court fighting the Home Affairs Department's bid to have them deported. For more on this, let's speak to the lead partner at Norton Rose Fulbright, Candice Pillay. Candice, a very good evening to you. Good to have your time on News at Prime. So, as I understand it, these undocumented migrants caught up in this are people who at some point would be expected, am I right, to give evidence at the inquiry into the building fire. Why do they absolutely have to be in the country in order to do that?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think it's important to understand that there are three processes that have started and taken place. The first of which is the Campepe Commission of Inquiry. And that inquiry is going to ascertain what caused the fire, the conditions of the building at the time, and then make recommendations. But that inquiry is also a public inquiry. And in terms of its terms of reference, the witnesses will have to give evidence in person. Now, if persons are not available, that evidence is absent to the Commission. And so you have to look at the current actions of the City of Joburg and the Department of Home Affairs in how it has affected both the South African residents who are living at Estendisa building as well as the foreign nationals who are now sitting at the Lindela Center awaiting deportation. If they are deported, they will not be given the opportunity to give their evidence before the Commission.
So, while we wait for this, what would you like to see as the most favorable scenario? Do the officials keep these undocumented migrants in South Africa until they each are due to give evidence, dependent on when that is, and then deport them immediately thereafter?
Well, that's actually what the applicant has asked the High Court in Johannesburg to do. Obviously, the Department of Home Affairs take a different view that the individuals have been found to be without papers and therefore are unlawful and should be deported immediately. The problem with that is that it's been reported that there were over 500 people living in that building. Our job as the attorneys of record was to consult with all of them. We've only completed 340 consultations. I have not even consulted with the persons at the Lindela facility. We only consulted with them for purposes of the Section 34 inquiry, and that's the inquiry in terms of the Immigration Act. And their statements still need to be minuted and provided to the Commission and ascertained whether they will actually give evidence orally. Now, there's no other provision for them to do so. We've asked the High Court in Johannesburg to keep them in the facility. We're not challenging the Section 34 inquiry. The magistrate undertook that inquiry and has made a conclusion. What we are saying is that they need to participate. It really gives them the dignity that they deserve. The context is important. Irrespective of their legality or lawfulness of being here, they are victims of a disaster. They were taken into the care of the City of Johannesburg, who picked them up outside their building after the fire and put them in these shelters. And so there must be a legal duty then to ensure that they participate fully in the Commission.
I've seen some of the commentary, in fact, beneath the article when it was posted in the last few hours. Some of the people saying, well, if these were people who were in South Africa illegally anyway, why is there such a fuss about having them be at the inquiry when there are other survivors who were in the building on the night who may in fact be able to offer the Commission the very same evidence? How would you respond to that?
Well, at the end of the day, the fire happened in the early hours of the morning. Many of the people were actually fast asleep and just were alerted that there was a fire. But it's not just how the fire started. There are people who actually saw the fire, but then it's where the fire started. There are many versions that the fire started in more than one places in the building. The Commission needs to hear that people also need to give evidence on the condition of the building, because that is the second outcome from the Commission of Inquiry. So while South Africans lived in rooms that they had been assigned to or that they had taken and hijacked, a lot of the structures were then built, and the condition of the structures need to be presented to the Commission so that the Commission can understand how the structures were erected, who erected them, and what actually happened to that building so that it became hijacked.
The other option, possibly, which came up at the inquiry yesterday, the Commission spokesperson being quoted by EWN saying what may need to happen, perhaps, if they are deported, is to bring them back into the country closer to the date of their evidence. Is that not the simplest, perhaps, solution?
Well, that would be wonderful if it actually worked, but these people return back to their countries. We don't know if they have the same infrastructure that we have here. I don't know how Home Affairs can find them once they return to their countries. In our consultations, they provided us with South African cell phone numbers, and obviously they don't have a residence here. We have indicated that to the Department of Home Affairs, but once they are lost, once they leave the country, that evidence is lost. While they're here, it can still be heard by the Commission, and ultimately the Commission needs to find the truth of what happened that day. And if there are bits and pieces of evidence that are not there, then the Commission's never getting to the truth of what actually happened on that day, which can have serious ramifications, especially with all the allegations that have been made. Was it a candle? Was it cables? Was it arson? There's lots of questions coming out, and I think it's relevant for each and every person to have a say. That's what access to justice means at the end of the day. If you have something to say and you need to contribute to the truth being uncovered, then you should be given that opportunity.
Do they have unique evidence, Candice, that they are going to bring before the Commission?
They do. They do. Remember, at the end of the day, as the previous person said, a lot of the foreign nationals were tenants in the building. So they have evidence as to who the landlord was and how much rental they paid and where they lived and where their structures were situated in the building that actually contributed to the disaster. And I think that is crucial because many people will tell you on which floor they were on, what was their exit route, why did they jump to the building, why were gates locked. This is information that has to be heard of the condition of the building. And not everyone will have the same version because they all lived in different floors, including the ground floor, including the basement. So each floor had its own separate conditions. And I think it's vital that we hear this evidence because it's probably going to inform the city and other government authorities of how the other hijacked buildings in the city of Johannesburg is also being constructed and taken over.
One of the accusations that's now floating about in this matter is that government is essentially, well, allegedly, trying to silence, if you will, the victims through these potential deportations. Why would government want to do that? Why would government want to silence survivors of a fire who would help to understand a problem as big as the hijacking of buildings in the inner city?
It has the effect of that. Remember, they were taken to the care of the city of Johannesburg and placed in those shelters, and now they've all been dispersed, and they've been arrested, and they are facing deportation. Anyone in their position would not want to then voluntarily come and give evidence before a commission. At the beginning, when they were sent to the shelter, undertakings were given by the ward councillor that they will not be arrested and they will not be processed. That was 2 months ago. 2 months later, they have been arrested, they have been processed, and they are facing deportation. So the actions of the authorities has created this dispersion and this intimidation and harassment of the residents of the shelter. Imagine being in a place where you know this is where I am. Now you're placed on an industrial site. You've got no water, unsanitary living conditions. You've got to make do. You might have children with you. And the most important thing is to survive, not to come and give evidence at a commission of inquiry. That does not, that's not relevant at this point in time to the residents who've been left at Denver. And if you look at the unsanitary conditions that they're living in, and we do welcome the city of Johannesburg committing to make the changes and adding more toilet facilities, more water, adding security and even stormwater drainage for them. Mm-hmm. But they are suddenly displaced. And the Commission of Inquiry can recommence at any time. And we need the witnesses to be ready to give their evidence.
Candice Pillay, good to speak to you from Norton Rose Fulbright, the law firm that's currently fighting to keep undocumented migrants who are affected in the Usindisa building fire in the country so they can participate in the inquiry that's looking into that disaster.